Hey everybody, Hit and Hustle back with you on a Wednesday afternoon out on the West Coast for Greg there, Jamie and Greg with you for our Sports Daily on their YouTube channel. Talking 2023 quarterback recruiting. Um, Super popular topic right now I'd say for all Notre Dame fans. Critical. Always a critical position in every class, right? But I think in this class, I think it means a lot because they have to also hit like a couple home runs at least in wide receiver recruiting too. So before we kind of get into, we're gonna go over Dante Moore and we're gonna go over Chris Vizzina, two of the guys that are like top of the board guys for Notre Dame. Before we get into that, Greg, just what do you think overall about why Notre Dame, or maybe you don't think that Notre Dame needs to land one of their top guys in this class?
I think you kind of hit it that they needed to happen because there's no. I feel like everything on especially from on the receiver part of it. Like I feel like it all kind of hinges on who the quarterback is going to be. If it's one of the top two guys that we're going to talk about today, whether it's Dante Moore or Chris Vizzina, like I think those receivers want to see who Notre Dame is going to bring in. And it's like really good receiver year for Notre Dame. They're in on, I mean, not just for Notre Dame, like nationally too. Like I feel like there's a lot of good receivers out there to be had, and everyone is kind of waiting on who that person is going to be, and it's kind of tricky too because I think that's of interest for the quarterbacks as well, right? Like the quarterbacks want to see who Notre Dame is going to be bringing in, so it all kind of fits together where like Notre Dame has to build the relationships with the wide receivers and kind of show them like, hey, like these are the quarterbacks that you're going to be playing with, right? And at the same time, like they need the quarterbacks to then see, the quarterbacks to see like these are the receivers that we're seriously involved with, and this is who we can land, and this is going to be who you're going to be playing with for the next 3-4 years. So that's why it's so big, I think, is that the two positions are linked pretty much. And so that's kind of how I see it happening. I think that once Notre Dame lands the quarterback, if they do, right, we don't know that that's going to happen, but if they do, I think that's when you would start to see a bunch of dominoes fall on the receiver end and all those things.
I couldn't agree more that I think it goes hand in hand, really, right? And I think especially when you look at where Notre Dame is at with quarterback and just where they've been at in recent years. And I don't want to take anything away from Ian Book and what he accomplished at Notre Dame. Obviously, he's the winningest quarterback in terms of total wins for a starter in Notre Dame history. I mean, to be a guy who was like a 3-star kid from Sacramento, didn't have like a really crazy offer list, and accomplish what he could accomplish, I think that's like, awesome for him. Phenomenal job by Tommy Rees helping develop him. But I just think, he was kind of hitting his head against the ceiling of what he was going to be. Like, it was probably, he was never going to have the measurables or the game to be more than a 4th round pick of what he was, right? So Notre Dame hasn't had the 1st round picks and they haven't had all of that, right? That's one of the reasons like Lincoln Riley can get Caleb Williams to transfer from Oklahoma and why he got him to commit to the first place, because he's had these guys, but it took a while to build that up. And I think right now where Notre Dame is at is, I mean, it's still a very high profile thing to be the quarterback at Notre Dame. Like, and I imagine like the next Brady Quinn, whoever that might be, that guy's going to make bank in NIL money. That guy's going to do really, really well. They just haven't had that guy yet. It's still a very high. Yeah. And I think that when you look at where they're at right now, they're kind of, it's almost like you're selling hope, because you're saying Buchner's going to be this. Maybe Pine, if he has a great spring, that he's going to be this, right? That's how you're kind of obviously you're bringing in receivers to visit the spring. They're going to watch a team practice, all that kind of stuff, right? And so you're selling that. But really, when you're selling that too, you got to kind of sell it with the quarterback in the class. And I think that's why it matters to land that top guy. Because if you get a Dante Moore, you get a Christopher Vizzina, like that, all of a sudden, because those guys are of that level, of that caliber, they end up, attracting these other guys and on the offensive side of the ball. And I mean, obviously we already know how they've started on the defensive side of the ball, but right. I really think, quarterback can be like a Pied Piper in terms of recruiting. And I think that could make a big impact.
Yeah. And it kind of leads to the conversation that we'll probably have, later on, where it's like, how do you go about getting one of these guys, right? Because, they're both highly ranked. Dante Moore is a top 10 guy. And I think Vizzina is currently top, like he's 71st, is in the 70s.
Yeah, he's a top 100 guy for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So top 100. And it's like, do you like, what do you do? Right. Like that's the big question. And that's like one that I think we've seen the most. And I think that we kind of talk about on the side and like amongst ourselves, like, what do you do in this situation? I think you guys had this question on Power Hour as well on Monday. It's like, how do you handle, this situation, right? Like, everyone kind of feels like Moore is the jewel, right? The highest ranked guy, the 5-star,
a Midwest kid too. Like there's all these boxes
like
that you want.
Like there's so many variables there with him. And but you have Vizzina too, who's like, we were going to show, like really good prospect, right? Like has so many tools and is like a really good athlete, really good arm. And you just kind of wonder, like, how do you juggle it? Where does Notre Dame go? And it's just like a really big kind of decision, for Tommy Rees, and not just for Tommy Rees, but being at such an important position, like for Marcus Freeman too. Like this is one where his input is like really important because, it needs to be, like we've been talking about, like it needs to go right for Notre Dame because it sets up so much in the class. And man, if, you get receiver going, this class could be really, really special.
Yeah. And I really think, like, obviously with the start right now, like you can totally ignore the early rankings in terms of how things are. Obviously Notre Dame hasn't started this well though in a while, and that should be noted. In terms of like average star ranking and all that kind of stuff too. It's not just like volume, right? It's the quality of guys. But I mean, you're looking for that kind of the dominoes to kind of take effect on offense, and that's really kind of where quarterback comes into it. And I think you're confident that Notre Dame is going to land at some point, the guys that they want on the offensive line. It would be surprising if they didn't, maybe they're not going to land all the guys at the top of their board, but they're going to land at least a couple of them, and they'll do well on the offensive line. They've got their tight end. They have a good back. Hopefully they land another good back in the class. I think with Dylan McCullough, I think he's a great recruiter. I think they have a great shot at that. But I think, and obviously Chauncey Stuckey's going to play a big part in what happens at receiver. But I also think the quarterback, I think that is just a big piece of it, right? And it's just a big piece of it. And I mean, you can say what you want to about like, how much like Elite 11 and all that kind of, it doesn't really matter that much, but it doesn't hurt to be like, to have your guy be like the top guy at Elite 11 or, to show out in those kind of settings, because it does, then those guys know, like, this guy's a baller. I would want to play with that guy. And
like the other receivers know, right? Like it's almost like not even about like who is actually the better prospect. It's like there's juice amongst the other recruits, and that makes a difference, right? And we were talking about, how, I guess it was a month ago, where it's like, where is Notre Dame in wide receiver recruiting? Like it was so unclear, like beyond Carnell Tate, right? Like that was the consistent name. Like who is Notre Dame actually a player for? And then over this last month, like it has started to become clear. And our guy Matt Freeman, like he posted a like an update on like where Notre Dame is currently with their wide receivers. And I really recommend people, go to the irishsportsdaily.com, go to the message board, and like the article is pinned on the top of the board. And if you're not a member, then sign up and it'll be right there. And it's like a really good overview of like where Notre Dame is wide receiver wise. And it's starting to become clear, right? With guys like with Gallagher and Braylon James and just some other players like Ronan Hannafin, players like that. And of course, Carnell Tate is involved in that too. And so you just kind of see like, okay, like you look at the names and you look at, the types of players that they are, and you're like, man, like Malik Elzy, an example of like, this is like Malik Elzy is a top 250 player who would be maybe the fourth receiver in this class, just given the other names that are on the board for Notre Dame right now. And that's the kind of caliber of player like they're after. So it's just like, it's all kind of, it's becoming clear, and it's like, okay, like now I feel like there's a path, a realistic path for Notre Dame, with the quarterbacks and at wide receiver, where it's like, okay, you can start to actually get excited, but you do have to land them, right? Like
you got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it became clear last year too. And it didn't work out, right? Like it worked out.
Have a plan B. Yeah.
Right. It worked out with Merriweather, right? Because he's a very good player, but like beyond that, we didn't get anybody. So, but at least now it's starting to come clear. And if it can happen the way it's happened, and I think there's a certain amount of like credibility that the staff gets to like, maybe they can land their guys because they're landing their guys on the other side, right? You go after Peyton Bowen, you land him. You go after Drake Bowen, you land him. You go after Keon Keeley, you land him. Brennan Vernon, you land him, right? So if you can take that, and it's like Marcus Freeman is now on the offensive side too, right? So it shouldn't be just, just him, right? Or it shouldn't be just because of it's the defense.
Yeah.
He should be able to do an offense too. So, it's all coming.
And they're tag teaming more guys and all that. Like definitely that's got a lot to do
with it. With Rodney Gallagher, like they got 5 coaches on him.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
and that's what you have to do in this time too. And that's also too how if there are changes, because I mean, coaching staffs are always going to be fluid. If something happens, well, you still have 3 guys on them or whatever, right? Like that matters. That definitely matters. But we'll dive into Dante Moore here.
Okay.
So I think, general Notre Dame recruiting fans very aware of him, highly rated guy out of Detroit, like you said.
Like he's 6. I think he's 6 on the 247 composite right now.
Yeah. I think he's more like top 30 for me overall. Obviously an elite prospect, you're a top 30 prospect overall in the class. You're pretty awesome. I'd say Vizzina is like, he's, like I said, top 100 for me. They're both really, really good quarterbacks. I think this is a good quarterback class. And I mean, he's certainly not the top guy, but pretty close, right? Pretty close.
Right.
And
what do you say we just run it, and then you talk about just more, like we'll run it. It's not that long, but we'll run it and then talk about more, and then we'll go back and look at the individual.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So, 6'2", here you see the RPO game, right? Which is quick release.
Mm-hmm.
Love the quick release from him, right? That's a thing. And, what you always say, natural thrower of the football, just has, I think, and if you're going to separate him and Vizzina, who we'll get into, I think has a good arm, like a plus arm. Moore, I think, has more of an arm. Like he's got more arm talent. And I think that's one of the things why he's so hyped, right? Is because he's a guy, flick of the wrist, he could flat-footed, you could just see him escape the pocket there, make a throw like that, right? And I think when you look at what he showed as like kind of like a decision maker, RPO wise, kind of the touch that he shows, and
Yeah.
you don't really see it on these throws in specifically, but definitely a touch. Those are very catchable ball. So even though he's got the velocity to kind of like fit it in over the middle, he shows the touch when it's needed and all that. And I think just, I think when I look at it, and when I look at quarterbacks and I'm evaluating them, I think you want to be plus in every category for sure, right? But I think what really separates a guy is if he's got a couple of elite traits in certain ways. So like there's got to be something there that separates him. And for me, with Moore, it's some of like the decision making, the release, all that just really jumps out to me.
Well, just the accuracy too.
Yes.
I mean, and accuracy
for yak and yards after catches. Yeah,
like
big.
accuracy under pressure. Like
yes,
he throws some of the best passes with people in his face, like you will see in high school football. I mean, it's like super impressive actually. Like he's just got like the arm angles, like however it needs to happen, and it's almost like if he's just standing in a clean pocket, right? Like he's not trying to go sidearm all the time, but he can manipulate his arm angle the way he needs to complete the pass, in context of the play itself, right?
Yeah.
He's not doing it just to do it. He's doing it because like I need to, right? This is how I need to do it. And it's like his RPO game too is so advanced I feel like is for this level of play. Like this one right here, like quick snap, like quick pull, set the feet, hit the guy in stride, and he's just like untouched over the middle for touchdowns.
And he's gonna get hit. Like you said. And I think, when we're talking about to Jack Cohn, who had definitely a good season, a great end to the season too. I mean, he wasn't a 0 when he got pressured, but he was not good when he was pressured. There's a big difference when he had a clean pocket and he had defined reads and he could work through his progressions quickly. But if he was pressured, he was not a guy who was going to create.
Yeah.
Not a guy who's going to be able to escape very often, and not a guy who's going to make a ton of throws or change an arm angle or do some of these things. And that's why in this next throw here too, especially this is just a really tough throw. He's about to get crunched here, but just back shoulder dime to this guy, while he's like basically on his back foot fading away. Like that's special.
It's like this is like a 40-yard pass, like
yes.
on a string where it's like who throws a back shoulder, like this deep, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to do it. It's like a 20-yard throw. Like this is a 40-yard throw off the back foot, taking a shot on the sideline, right? It's just so difficult. And this is another one there where it's like the placement of this pass, exactly where it needs.
Ball placement is why I picked that play, because I just think that is exactly where he needs to go. If he leaves that inside, it's picked, right? It's got to be outside right there. And it's just quick release, just so quick. And here again,
someone right in his face.
Yeah. 2 guys right in his face. Actually 3 guys, because there's another guy coming from the other side.
Yeah.
But like, there's just some guys who have that kind of it when it's like, I don't care. My eyes are down the field, whatever. And so he can hang in there. And obviously this one is the one you see him escape. And I think that is critical too. It's so critical in today's football. You have to be able to escape the rush. You have to be able to know when to get out, when to run, when you can still find somebody, change your arm angle, make a throw, because when you can't do that, that means the play's dead.
Right. Yeah, the play is over. Yeah.
And there's just too many plays like that because you're dealing with you force the protection, or you force the call and the protection to be perfect. And if it's not, and something breaks down, you want a guy who can be able to make a play. And obviously you want a guy to be able to win from the pocket, no doubt, right? And you want to be able to get a stand in there, check, big check, double check, triple check, really, when you think about Dante Moore on this. But you want to be able to do that, step out, change an arm angle, and make a throw like this.
And a good example of what we're talking about with we'll just run his highlights while we do this, is is Jack Cohn on that fourth down play against Oklahoma State, right? Like late in the game, where it like Notre Dame went for it. I think it was the 4th and 4 or something like that, and it was deep in Notre Dame territory. It's the fourth quarter, and K-Man got beat, and Jack Cohn had to flush. And right when he flushed, like this, it's over. Like they're not gonna. This play's not gonna happen because it's just not the strength of his game, right? Like he's not.
Yeah.
He needs a clean. He needs to be clean back there and pick out his guy. And when he can do that, he's accurate. As you can see with Dante Moore, like not only is he operating in a situation where the pocket isn't always clean, but he can make a play. He can make a play even when the defense wins up front. And then he also then knows, like, I know where to go with this ball to have a successful play for the offense. And so it's like the poise, the accuracy there, the mobility. And I've seen, in his sophomore clips, there were a couple plays where he actually scrambled and ran for a good amount of yards.
Yeah.
So you don't really see it as a junior. Like he's a lot like Bryce Young.
I was thinking that's the guy that you would compare him with because Bryce Young doesn't really run, right?
He's mobile, but he doesn't run.
But he can.
Yeah.
And Dante Moore is similar where all of a sudden something broke down, he could take it 25, 30 yards and he could do some damage with his legs. He's a good athlete, right? A very good athlete. Also could be used in design run game. Obviously, you see his decision making with the RPO game. A lot of that is similar to what you're doing with some of the reads with, zone read and all that, right? But I think he's a guy who wants to win from the pocket. Obviously, like he's not looking to get out. The first sign of danger, he's not. Like he has a good sense. And like you said, poise. Poise is the perfect word for it. And I just can't really recall too many guys that have looked that poised under pressure. Especially because when you see a lot of film from a lot of these guys, obviously it's for a lot of guys, highlight film, you don't get to see them pressured that much. A lot of these guys have like huge clean pockets. And obviously you want to be able to make the throws when the pocket's clean and all that, but like it's not always going to look like that. So you have to be able to, adjust and handle it when it's like that.
Yeah. And, that I think the big question this year for Buchner is, can he perform on when the play is on schedule, basically, like when the pocket is good, when you're just dropping back, can you go through your reads and make a good throw? Right. And like, I don't have that question with Dante Moore. Like he doesn't need the chaos, right? He doesn't need to be using his legs. Like I don't think if Dante Moore was a quarterback on last year's team, like they wouldn't have brought him in to run the offense.
No, not like at all like that.
They wouldn't have done that. Yeah, like it wouldn't have happened. And so I think Buchner is more of a runner in that sense, but like Moore, I think I'm not saying Tyler Buchner can't do the things that Moore is doing. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like I'm more confident that Moore can, because it's like that's more of what his game is. Like Buchner is kind of out of pocket, or he has been more of that, right? Like the running and the zone read, running, like throwing the ball on the run, like really like rolling left and throwing sidearm across his body and that sort of thing. The question is like, can you hang in the pocket and do everything you can consistently, right?
Yeah.
And then Moore, you just have complete confidence that he can, right? So I feel like his like Moore's the floor for him is like way, like it's a high, like super high floor, like raised floor for him. So yeah, it's like the bust rate on him, I feel like would just be so low.
Yeah. And because of that, like poise and all that, and being able to handle the pressure and stuff too, that also makes you think this is a guy who could probably compete early. Like, and really like, even though obviously game speed picks up, the reads are tougher, you got to learn the offense, all that kind of stuff. Just skills wise, he is a guy you would think that could probably play early in his career. So he's, fair to say he's QB1 for Notre Dame in recruiting right now. And I guess you could say Christopher Vizzina is 1B probably, is the way you would put it. He's a different player, not just because he's from the South, but just I would say he is an underrated athlete, a good runner. We're going to show some of the stuff that he does as a runner. Could be used in the run game, like a little bit, as Notre Dame fans would kind of remember, a little bit Brendan Clarkish. If you watch like kind of what Brendan Clark did as a runner, not all dissimilar from that. Certainly not like, I wouldn't call him dynamic at all, but definitely is, or like a true dual threat, but definitely a guy you can run and call things for. Not a Jack Cohn in the pocket where he's going to do that, and I think has a decent feel for it. I like you said, plus arm, big, 6'4". He looks like he's going to be huge. He looks like he's going to be one of these 6'4", 235, like a big, not quite Roethlisberger, but like still big. One of those guys that if you could see him shaking off like some tackles in the pocket and stuff like that, like he could do that. And obviously you see him like truck some dudes, whatever. Obviously, I don't think he'll be doing that too much.
Wet blank. That's too soon. We can't.
Yeah.
It's too soon on the Spencer Sanders stuff. I appreciate it. I appreciate that, but it's too soon. We're gonna have to come up with another comp. So put up another comp, and we'll put it up.
Yeah, and I would say too, like Spencer Sanders incredibly had the best.
I'll tell you what I was thinking. I'll tell you what I was thinking when I was watching him. I think he's a better athlete than DeShone Kizer was. And
I actually thought he was similar, but yeah, that makes sense.
I think he's a better runner than DeShone Kizer was. Not like I think he's above Kizer, below like Zaire, because like it's hard because of the size, right? Like he's such a big guy, but that's why I went with Kizer, because Kaiser's taller. So I think he's a better athlete than, like, he's a better runner than Kizer. Like Kizer, he ran when he needed to. I feel like he did a pretty good job of, like, he knew when to run, and they had the design runs, right? So they had some quarterback counters, especially like in like short yardage stuff, right? So like 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, they would run the little quarterback counter or the quarterback power, and he would, he could lean in for a couple yards. And then if you gave him enough room, he could run for like a good amount of yards, right? But it wasn't like you weren't really expecting it. You know what I mean? But like you also have to respect the zone read. You can't crash every time, because he'll get you for a good 10 to 15 yards. So yeah, so that's how I view
physically him. I think he is pretty similar to Kizer. I would say. I think that's a pretty good comp for him. At least a Notre Dame comp for sure. Yeah. All right, let's get to the clips of him. And right away,
this is a good example right here.
Yeah. And right away, you kind of wanted to just like show that like this does look like a lot like DeShone Kizer. Yeah. Like when you just see him run there, that first run. Obviously you see a guy get out of the pocket, square up his shoulders, deliver square up his shoulders, deliver a dime there. It's a pretty impressive throw. This one too, that's my favorite one. We'll get back to it, but him, going through his reads and then fitting it in. It's tight window. And you see some good pocket movement. Also, I would say a lot of things you like about him, you see like impressive things there. The things that I would say what separate him from Moore, I mean, you see obviously less of, you don't see all the like guy in his face, him dropping a dime kind of thing. Like you don't see that nearly as much.
I mean, this
is a tremendous throw. That's a big time throw.
That's big time. Like
that's a big time throw. This is why he's a top 100 kid. That is a big time throw.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's not so this idea that he's like, I would say even if you look at like Steve Angeli, who I think was, in my opinion, was underrated a little bit,
Yeah.
and I liked him a bit more than some others. But I think he's kind of like plus Steve Angeli, like just like a bigger, stronger, similar athlete. Because I think Angeli's probably a pretty decent athlete too. But like that's the way I kind of see it for him, and that's why he's like a top 100
Yeah.
level kid. And there's some things that I didn't like. I think um, he's got some like pretty erratic pocket movement at times. Sometimes he did some really good stuff, I thought, but then also too like just some unnecessary footwork. Obviously, they got him working out a gun, and he's taking like these super, super deep drops that are like a lot of those are. I mean, that's just something he wouldn't do
Right.
at Notre Dame, and those are like sacks,
Yeah.
pretty much because like the only guy who does that in football and can get away with it is Patrick Mahomes, because he can like escape like 10 million times. But like I don't think he'd be able to do some of those things.
And like, like like you don't want to count on someone to be that, right? Like you don't. That's not what you're looking for.
No, and which is why a lot of people were like, Patrick Mahomes, like this guy's not going to be able to do this, and then they're like, oh, exactly. He can do this, right? But yeah, but yeah, I mean, he's a really impressive kid. Like, I don't think people kind of think that he's like would be a consolation prize. I would not put him in that category at all. I think he's a really, really good player, and like would not be shocked if he's like if he ends up at Notre Dame being a great player, or wherever he ended up. Like, I think he has a chance to be a great player too. I just like Moore better than him.
Yeah, I love this play here because there's a free runner and he just shucks him like,
yes,
like, love yeah, like I'm just no,
yeah,
like, I don't really feel this.
That was the Roethlisberger-ish type of play that I like. This one too.
All right, is this your favorite player?
Yeah, this is my favorite one from his clips here. So obviously you see him work through his progressions, work across the field, and here this is like, so that guy thinks, oh, it's coming to me. Look how tight that is. Look how that has to be a seed, and that has to be right there and delivered right on time when he's getting the ball out. Like, that's a big time throw.
This is pretty. I mean, it's like, yeah.
So like, not a consolation prize. I'll
Great
say
catch
again,
by the receiver.
Great catch.
And by the way, I'm just so everyone understands, I'm not cutting it that close. His highlight tape is very much like it's not important what the
you don't care what the receivers did.
Yeah, they don't care about
it's very quick cut.
As soon as
reminded,
like, yeah, like it's quickly cut. Like as soon as they
actually reminded me a lot of Josh Rosen. I don't know if you ever watched that.
No, I didn't.
But when I first started getting into this, and I can't remember if I was working for ISD then, but I was doing other stuff and I was working for some other sites. And I started like Josh Rosen, and I just realized like he put on so many. I mean, he was awesome in high school. Obviously, he like prolific, but he put on so many highlights where the guys dropped passes that I was like, did you really need this extra 3 minutes of highlights? Because it was very long, right? Yeah. But he had a lot of like guys wide open. He's hitting in the stride. Guys just dropping. And it's like St. John Bosco. So the guys are pretty decent players. But
Vizzina's tape has some drops in it too.
Yeah, it has some drops.
I mean, so they're not like, as soon as like, it's like, okay, he caught it, we're going on the next thing. So it was actually hard to cut up his highlights. It's like super awkward.
Yeah. And you know what I'll say about him and Moore too, that I really, really like? And I'm not saying quick game is important, right? Quick game is important, throwing like bubbles and stuff like that. I mean, it's those are the layups, right? You got to be able to make the layups, right? But on a highlight tape, you throw in one or two of those, you could just see like timing, ball placement, whatever. That's fine. That's it. Don't throw them any more than that.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot, because you see these guys make impressive downfield throws, middle of the field throws. Those are the kind of like wide side of the field throws. Those throws matter. You're not just throwing like a hook to the boundary, 10 times on. Like, don't show that. Like, kids if you're trying to put together a highlight tape for a quarterback, like, do not, like, one or two is fine of those. You don't need to show that. Like, that's not a throw. That's a throw that everyone, I could maybe make that throw, like that. I put the maybe in there on purpose, but I really like, it's not a throw that people are checking the boxes for elite status. So, but I think you see, in terms of like, if you end up say like the highs for both of these guys are very high.
Yeah. I personally love this throw, like stepping into the pocket. It's like stepping up into the pocket to throw, right? And you get the late breaker here. So he reads it out. This, he's got the hole here and he knows it's coming. He's ready to throw. He's going to take a hit. And he just throws a dime in there. It's like, this is either like third or second and 17 or whatever it is. And it's just a bullet.
Yeah.
Just tremendous.
Yeah. And one thing I will say is I think his release sometimes can get a little bit long. As opposed to Moore. Not that he's like, he doesn't look like maybe he's a baseball kid or whatever. Like, and that's kind of a lot of baseball kids obviously have the longer delivery. It's not like it's not Byron Leftwich, right, where he's like really cocking it back or anything like that. But it is a noticeable difference when you compare it to Moore.
Yeah, Moore is just like super compact, like quick
just
like
wrist,
not
like
a ton of like wasted movement. It's just none of that stuff. He gets it out.
Yeah,
and it comes out like super pretty.
It's special. So I mean, I think you could say that like both of us feel that if they land either one of these guys, I mean, you could build a class around both of these guys. So I think you say Moore is the priority, but I would say Vizzina, it like as been written about on ICD and some other sites, if they end up getting Vizzina, they're going to be fine. They're going to be more than fine. And but I really think though, I mean, Moore, I will say there's a little bit more again hype around him, and I think that does matter. I think that does.
Honestly, it would be an earthquake. I think it would just be like, in terms of like Notre Dame recruiting, it would be just a huge development. Because it would I think, because I guess I'll just say the narrative, I don't know, behind Notre Dame has been that they can't land this caliber of quarterback.
Yeah.
And so to do that would be would just be like,
it'd be huge.
It would be huge, right? It would be enormous, right?
Especially in like the first year of post Brian Kelly, of Marcus Freeman, of kind of like independent Tommy Rees, like independent George Costanza, and just I think it would be big. I think it'd be really
Costanza?
Big. Yeah, just like independent George, right?
Independent George.
Independent George.
Good for you. I was like, did he was that like, did you say the wrong thing or no? I got it.
I mean, if they land Dante Moore, it's gonna be the summer of Tommy, right? He can do whatever he wants. Be just like the summer of George. So
the summer of
Reese. He can celebrate all he wants if they land Dante Moore, and I think they'll be pretty happy with it. So
I want to get this from David Solomon, because he kind of hits on, like, I guess like a broader question, right? So like Dante Moore is key. Every year they hold out for someone and lose. Last year it was Nwankpa. The year before it was Shipley. If you believe in the law of averages, maybe this is the year. A, maybe it is. And B, like, should they hold out for more, right? Because I don't know, like, it's hard to know exactly where Notre Dame is with either of these guys. A, because Moore is like notoriously doesn't do the thing where he posts a top 5 or a top whatever. He doesn't do that.
About that,
and he's not gonna do that. So you don't really know where they're at with him. Vizzina has been linked to, I guess, Clemson, right? So it's kind of like a Notre Dame Clemson thing at this point. Well, let's say, I think Vizzina is supposed to come in mid-March, right? let's say he comes in, and I don't, and that's before Moore is going to be on campus. I don't know that he actually has a date to come back to Notre Dame, although I think most people expect that he will. Let's say he wants to commit. Like, what do you do? Do you take him?
You take him.
You take him. All right. So talk me through that. Like, why not wait?
I think you present it to Dante Moore. Like, the other thing is, no one shows up and just randomly decides I'm going to commit. That doesn't happen anymore. It's always like we think that this kid's going to commit. That's why every time, a kid commits, or not every time, but 99% of the time, there's a film don't lie ready that I've pre-written about some guy, because he's either been committed or we knew he was close to committing or whatever, right? There's a lot of that that happens with guys.
Yeah.
So I think they'll have a pretty good read from it. What would probably happen is, this is what I imagine will happen with Notre Dame.
Okay.
He's not going to come in and commit, but he might go there and decide, like, this is the place it's going to be. They'll be like, go home, whatever. And then if they get the vibes that he's thinking about, he's close to popping, they're going to tell Dante Moore, well, Vizzina's, we think he's going to close to commit. If you want the spot, you got to take it. And that's what it will happen. And whether or not they lose it, but you can't risk losing Vizzina if Moore says no, because then if you don't end up with either of them, and I'm higher on Avery Johnson than some people too. I think he's really got good potential as a great athlete. But I just think there's obviously, especially how they feel about it too, there's a pretty big gap there. So I just don't think you can pass it up if that's the case. But I mean, that's just how it goes. Like it happened with, and obviously it sounds weird scenario when you think about how twists and turns of these guys' career, but like Avery Davis, right? Where they were like, well, we want you, but Hendon Hooker's going to visit. And it's like, do you want the spot? Like, this is what's going to happen. And it's like, pretty much right after, that was like, Avery Davis is going to take the spot, right? Like, that's just, it happens because these guys worry about like losing their spot. And obviously Dante Moore is not going to worry about that, but at least you kind of put it out there, because that too, I mean, it's like when they say with like the CBA or with anything, they're like deadline spur action, right? So like things happen because when there's a deadline, it's just like anything. It's like, oh, I got a paper due tomorrow. And it's like, well, I'm not doing it. I haven't worked on it all week. And then it's like, well, I guess I'm pulling an all-nighter. It's due at 8 a.m., right? And then you got to get it done. It's like, and you realize you're like, this class isn't important to me, whatever. I'll hand it in late, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, going to be the situation if that hypothetical were to happen, where they would say to Dante Moore, like, if you really want in, now's the time. And then he's got to think about, do I really want in? And if he wants in, that's that. And that's the way you kind of have to, I think that's the way I think they kind of have to treat it. Right. Yeah. And if it works out that they lost out on Moore because of that and ended up with Vizzina, I mean, like I said, he's not a consolation prize. So
yeah, there's a couple of things in play. Like he's good. I think he's good enough to say, we can win a championship with him as our starting quarterback, and as like our like as the plan, right? So like Ian Book was a back end kind of guy. Like, can we get to the playoffs with this person? But like, we're not going to win the playoffs because of him. There needs to be something else. Like, I think Vizzina is good enough to where you can win a championship because of the quality of his play. And the other part is, I guess, the NFL spends so much time trying to decide who the best quarterback is and who is going to work and who is not going to work and who's the best fit for us and all those things. And they get it wrong all the time.
Oh yeah.
And so I think the point there is like, we don't know enough it's an exact science to the point where it's like, if you see someone like Vizzina who's good enough, who you say, okay, we can win a title with him, right? The question of whether or not you feel like Moore is quote unquote better, it's like, yeah, he's better, but like how much, right? How much better is he? And this is a question for the coaches, right? Like it's not my
Yeah, they have to determine it.
I get the sense that the gap is not as much. And when I say I get the sense, like, it just, in my opinion, I don't get the sense from any like source or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know that the gap is that big to where it's like you risk losing someone who wants in, right? If you want in, then you said it. And the other part of that too is in terms of like other players wanting to come because of X quarterback. Like if Notre Dame believes that Vizzina is good enough to take, and it means losing more, then you should be able to sell that player to those other players. You should be able to say like, hey, we believe in this guy. That's why we took him. You know, we know what we
well, and it's not like you said, he's not like, it's not like he's a 3-star kid. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Oh yeah, but I think from the narrative of the other guys want to play with Moore and that sort of thing. I don't know that they don't want to play with Vizzina. I don't know anything about that.
I think
the point is, like, if there was that conversation, Notre Dame should be able to say like, hey, like this guy's good.
I think what is going to happen too, this is the other thing, as you know, Notre Dame fans are legitimately worried about what's going to happen and how it's all going to play out, is that the spring is coming up and all these guys are taking visits, and right now all of the schools that don't have a quarterback right now, which is most of them, most of the top ones, they have their top guys. There's like a lot of schools that are like, Arch Manning is their guy. And they're like, man, we got to get Arch Manning. But they're waiting to see that, like, we're not going to get him. And then they move on, right? So that's how it goes. And then there's like, Dante Moore is that guy for like Notre Dame, you would say. And like Ohio State, I would say to a certain extent too, like Michigan, like, and then they have other guys, but it's like, this is their guy, right? So all this kind of, it's all going to be dominoes. Right. And that's how it's going to end up working out, is that, they're just going to, they're going to fall down. They're all going to fall down, and you're just going to see where everything lands in the end. And I think, I do think it'd be, significant if Moore's the guy. Right. Yeah. So, but I mean, we'll see what happens. Like, I know we should get on to, if anyone's got questions, you can throw them in the comments, but we asked for some questions. We got some questions from Irish Sports Daily customers that we're going to get to as well.
Yeah, I've got them up. Do you want me to just read them?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So there's one from Zalezo VLK. Not sure if you've covered it before, but whose college football offense would you like to see Tommy steal from some concepts plays from?
Coastal Carolina, 100%. I'm not sure if you've seen much of them, Greg, but they're 21 personnel, which we already did. Check out our old show on that 21 personnel and what Notre Dame did. You could do it. They do a ton of stuff. It's super fun. It's just a really fun offense. A lot of, it's like a triple option offense, but not so like a spread running game, but also extremely efficient big play passing game too. And they do it. They don't have the players at receiver. They don't have the numbers at receiver. And that's one of the reasons they do it. So I think specifically for this season and where Notre Dame is at with receiver numbers, that's something that I could see. I would like to see them expand on some of that. And obviously with Buchner and some of the stuff you can do in the run game with him, some of that like orbit stuff they do with I mean, they've already kind of did some of that, which we kind of showed a little bit with like, Tyree doing that as well. And like, I think they could do more. You do a ton of stuff with like running backs, like attacking vertically. I think I'm going to write about it next week, maybe, and just like, maybe dive into it a bit further. Obviously it's like something that like hardcore X and O college football nerds have like really written about and dived into about, and they do really, really cool stuff. So I don't know. There's for me, that's something that I would love to see Notre Dame kind of like, borrow or steal some concepts from them.
I really liked I really loved Alabama's RPO game, especially from what they did against Notre Dame in 2020. Like I felt like that was like they killed them with RPOs in that game. Like that was
Yeah.
basically all they did.
It was a clinic.
Yeah, it was. And it's like that was my template for like be doing this stuff. Like you should there's no reason that Notre Dame shouldn't be doing all of these concepts. And they started to do more of it, so that's good. And it's funny, like I think the question was about college football. College football offense. But I was, you and Matt always got into it about, what you could do with your tight ends. And I feel like Notre Dame has
bring it. Let's go.
Notre Dame has so many tight ends. And I feel like go look at what the 49ers are doing. Because you have
that's it. I mean, if this is for college football, but to me, I'm like the blueprint and what Notre Dame has personnel wise, like the 49ers.
Yeah.
It like
because no one else does it. That's the thing. Like
no one else does it like they do it. And obviously, you can say a lot of things about Kyle Shanahan, some of the game day management stuff with him, but the guy is like, if anyone was a guru out of like these guys, like, the Shanahan, McVay, that coaching tree, I mean, they do it as well as anybody in the NFL level, at any level, really. And what they do with some of their stuff to create, obviously they had Mike McDaniel there, who's now at the Miami Dolphins. He's their head coach, and they do like a ton of like really cool stuff in the run game. And obviously the way they use Deebo Samuel. And I put in this thing last week that he gave this interview where he's talked about like the reason why they were so good at yards after catch. They were addicted to getting their playmakers the ball. And I was just like, man, I eat that stuff up. I really just think that, especially if like Kevin Bauman kind of shows some of the stuff that we saw a little bit from him last August, or if like Kane Barong, who like heard a ton of great stuff about him as a receiver and what he can do. Mitchell Evans, I'm excited about him. Like, I mean, I don't expect Holden Staes or Eli Reardon to make much of an impact in year one, but eventually Eli Reardon, I think, is going to be like awesome. So
I mean, it would be perfect for this stuff too.
Yeah. So I definitely think they're another team with some of the stuff they do. And that, like Rees likes the Ram stuff too. So yeah.
Okay, from UND 63, how will Buchner's development affect quarterback recruiting? Will NIL adversely affect Notre Dame's chances of signing a top prospect?
I don't think so. Well, I don't think the NIL part. I mean, I guess it's unpredictable, but I would say that I would just sell him to be like, listen, I would just be like, this was Brady Quinn, the guy who dropped in the draft like a stone and whatever. And I'm not trying to diss Brady Quinn. Obviously, he was a tremendous player for Notre Dame. I'm just saying what actually happened to him. So he was supposed to be a top guy, but he wasn't the top guy. Still, he was Notre Dame quarterback, all-American type guy, like just was perfect, looked like he was going to be a star, whatever. The first Notre Dame quarterback in a while to be that kind of first-round quarterback. And he had like more endorsements than like anybody else at that time. If anyone approaches that level at Notre Dame, the guy is going to make bank before he leaves school. So, I mean, to me, there's a lot that they can sell that. There's no way like Caleb Williams is getting like Beats by Dre or whatever kind of thing. Like the Notre Dame quarterback, if that guy can get up to any kind of level to that, is going to get paid, whatever. I think in terms of Buchner and his development and what that means, I think it's critical. And it maybe doesn't have to be Buchner. Could be Pine, whatever, right? It has to be someone.
Quarterback play.
Quarterback development, I think it matters. Not obviously just success in the field, but in terms of like, again, attracting these other guys. Because I think one thing that really hurt Notre Dame, and it wasn't Tommy Rees' fault, but Brandon Wimbush being like, he had a ton of hype surrounding him coming in. Not to throw Matt Freeman under the bus, but he was predicting Heisman hopeful in that first year. Because I mean, he really was,
He was
could make
dynamic.
some throws and stuff. He was dynamic runner and all that, right? And he had the yips. Couldn't even throw a bubble, right?
Yeah.
Like he couldn't do any of that. So just straight worm burners all over the field, and really never became the guy that he did, that people expected him to be. It just didn't work out for him, right?
Yeah.
And because of he was like and he was, I mean, we could say it now, he was bad. A great runner, but like a bad passer. Like I think he was like 98th or something in like yards per attempt or pass efficiency. He was deep down the list. And it looked like he was going to be the starting quarterback for 2 more years. That didn't help Notre Dame. And it definitely lost them Equinemius St. Brown from coming back the next year. That definitely, because they were like, Ian Book, he knew Ian Book was better, and he was like, I don't think he was going to win the job. And they didn't give him the job right away. It took the 3 games of 2018. And they had no chance at Amon-Ra. And I just think Amon-Ra would have just been actually, because even if you look at how things worked out at quarterback for Amon-Ra, like Ian Book probably would have been an upgrade really to what he experienced with kind of like some of the ins and outs with the quarterback position there. And now you're seeing him ball in the NFL. So yeah, that's a long way of saying like, yeah, he can't have like a Brandon Wimbush kind of. He's got to play well. Pine's got to, whoever it is, has to play really well. And it's not just to win games or whatever, but it matters because of your recruiting receivers, and you're doing all this. And then if you don't do that, then it's like, then that like landing a Dante Moore becomes even more important.
Yeah. And in the meantime, like you have guys like Dan Orlovsky from ESPN tweeting things out like Tommy Rees is a top 5, quarterback developer. Like you need to use that somehow, right? Like I was listening to a pod today from The Athletic.
Why did that not get? Sorry to interrupt, but why didn't that become like a graphic?
I have no idea.
Notre Dame graphic department.
This is like he is all over ESPN and all of their production and all these things. He's calling Notre Dame games, and you're talking like he's saying Tommy Rees is a top 5 quarterback like developer, and this is like, why did I not see this? And so there's that. I was listening to this draft pod with Lance Zierlein and Dane Brugler from The Athletic, and they were talking about Jack Cohn today and how they were really impressed with him and the way that he developed and the way that he was, worked in the pocket and his mid-range throws and things like that. Like, where is that? Like that needs to be pumped up. Like that needs to be, Notre Dame needs to find a way to like advertise that. You have this coach who the Rams are apparently interested in, and that came from Dan Orlovsky, right? Like they need to do a better job of like selling the fact that Tommy Rees has a better reputation than the
Notre Dame fans give him credit for.
Yeah, like the national narrative, like that needs to be pumped up a lot more, right?
Yeah.
People need to know about that. So that in the meantime, right? Like I totally agree with you. Like, Buchner has to have a really good season, but let's talk more about that.
Yeah, but I think 100% spot on.
Iris Bronx, like you wanted us to compare more in Vizzina's prospects. Like I think we did that. So
yeah, we pretty much did.
But thank you for the question. Let's see. CB Irish had one on the defense. Since Golden will be using Freeman's terminology, will Golden be installing his own scheme that can mesh with the previous system?
I wouldn't say he's going to come in and it's not going to be like a scheme like he's bringing in all this new stuff, because it's not going to. He's going to bring in what they can handle. He'll add things to what Notre Dame has already done. That's the way I think that you'll look at it. And in a way too, when you look at like how Notre Dame's defense this year compared to how it looks under Clark Lee wasn't all that different. not things here and there. Obviously, some third down stuff I think was quite a bit different. But and obviously they ran some of the 3 down and whatever, right? But I think there was a lot of stuff that they didn't change too much because it was like they didn't need to. Like
Yeah.
if it's not broke, you don't fix it. So I think he will bring stuff in from Cincinnati. You mentioned like that kind of like the passing off the robber thing from last week. That's something I mean that kind of thing. I imagine. I mean he'll bring in stuff, but I just don't think it's not going to be like, man, this Al Golden scheme looks so much. I don't think it's going to look anything like that.
Yeah, agree. There was a question. Let me go back to it here. There was one about the 22, like projecting the 22 starting lineup. Do you want to skip that for later because that's like so hard? Fifth quarter Irish asked about guessing the starting 22.
Yeah. Fifth, thanks for the question. Great ISD poster. Always awesome with the numbers and stuff. We'll save that for the next one. How about
let's
that?
use this. Let's use this one. Let's close on this one. Do you think September results for Freeman will have a big impact on how we close the 2023 recruiting class? So if Notre Dame finds a way to win in Columbus, like, do you think that'll be, how much do you think that'll matter?
I think it'll matter more for 2024 kids. That's the way that I would put it, because I think with the way things have gone for Notre Dame, I think that they'll have most of the class pretty set by that, or like at least like the meat of the class will be set by that point. And even if they say like lost by 3 touchdowns, if that happened, whatever, I don't think that is going to like guys who are looking for a way out after that we're already looking for a way out. That's the way I always look at those kind of games. So yeah, that's my opinion, because I think like if they won on the road at Ohio State, I mean, I think it would mean a lot more and have maybe give them a bump, but I don't think it's going to hurt them that bad if they lose that game.
Yeah, it would have to be like really, like it would not just that game. It would have to be like a really bad, just September and October for it to really, like, it would have to be just, I don't know, 3-3 or something like that, or 2-2.
Yeah, it has to be like well, I mean, Brian Kelly obviously had a disastrous October, or September and October in his first one, right?
Yeah.
And they ended up signing Stephon Tuitt and Aaron Lynch in that class.
Yeah, like I don't know what would happen. I'm just saying, like for it to become a factor, it would have to be.
It would have to be very disastrous. It'd have to be look like, oh no, he is in way over his head.
Right,
like it'd have to look like that, and I don't see that happening.
Yeah. Yep. So I think that's it for questions.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for the questions. Fifth, we'll get to that. We promise we'll get to that next time. Although if you listen to Power, I hate these projecting the fall.
We don't even know because
you have to see
who's going to be on the roster. So that's the hard part.
It always changes. I think maybe what we'll do actually for the next show is we'll talk about the 2 deep and kind of how we hope things turn out for the next thing, if like things kind of project as they go, and because you're always hoping for like a Prince Colley to like make a big jump.
And we'll be talking about that. So much like once, like during
spring and stuff and all that too. So definitely, but promise to get to that later on though, Fifth. So thanks for the question. Thanks everyone for listening. Went a little bit longer today, but I think it was worth it because we talked a lot of Dante Moore and Chris
Subscribe
Vizzina.
to the show. Subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe. Hit the like button there. And subscribe to oursportsdaily.com. You can check out stuff. I got 6 thoughts on a Thursday tomorrow. We'll do some more another video soon. And maybe I was thinking about we should dive into some more Notre Dame commits. And obviously there's going to be a ton of visits coming up. So exciting times right now. Exciting times. Spring ball coming up before you know it. March 17th is going to kick off. So very excited for that. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.